Do you have,
Welcome to episode 101 of the Valley Sports Talk podcast. We are back with a normal sort of me and Brandon talking episode. Even though after the support and stuff we've heard from the last episode, we should almost try to just interview people every episode because nobody really wants to hear us talk.
honestly, this is a lot of views on the episode 100.
Yeah, so thank you guys for your support. Um, as I was just mentioning to Brandon right before I pressed record, and he was about to say something, which I don't know what the heck he was going to say, but I guess we'll never know.
Yep.
We have a decent amount to talk about. Obviously, the Stanley Cup Final has been won as Florida defeated Edmonton in 7 games this past Monday. We'll get to that. There's been a couple trades, a couple re-signings, and the NHL draft is tonight. If you were watching this when it comes out, we're recording this Thursday. So yesterday, if you're watching it right when it comes out, the NHL first round is tonight, and then the second round is on Saturday. And then on Canada Day for us, July 1st, the NHL free agency begins. So even though the season just ended, it seems like we're still right in the middle of a busy sort of week in the NHL.
Oh, it's very busy. It's crazy. Which is kind of good because we're getting to that point where there's no sports left. But at least with the playoffs going so long, we jump right into free agency and stuff, which is nice. And then, I mean, we got the Olympics, which will help as
Hmm.
well.
So yeah, as mentioned, Florida won its first ever NHL Stanley Cup championship. So congratulations to them, even though they did almost blow a 3-0 lead in the series, which has only ever one team has ever came back. We mentioned this that it was Toronto in 1942, which is a while ago. Um, so yeah, give me your sort of first reactions, thoughts, stuff like that.
I thought it was a really good game. It was interesting to watch. It was a low scoring game, but even for low scoring, it was pretty eventful. Both goalies played really well. Um, I thought Florida kind of dominated the beginning, which really helped them, I think, in this game because it got the crowd going early. A lot of big hits, and that first goal, a really nice tip by Verhage.
Very nice.
That puck was going way wide, and then he brought it back. Um, and then obviously Edmonton scored right after with a really good pass by Cody Ceci. Ex-Leafs just making plays out here in Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals to tie it back up. And then not too long after, Florida scored again, so to capture momentum again. But I thought it was a really intense game. I thought the refs did a good job not calling much, letting just calling the really obvious ones and letting these guys figure it out on themselves. And Edmonton had a really good push at the end, but ultimately couldn't get it done. And when they pulled the goalie, it was pretty uneventful. With I don't think they got a shot on net with the goalie pulled. But other than that, they were buzzing in the third period, and I did think they were going to tie it up, but fell just a bit short.
Yeah, we first mentioned how it was a low scoring game. I think um, the last 10 comp or game sevens in Stanley Cup history, have all been under 5.5 goals, which is always the betting line for a game seven. The last 10 game sevens in NHL history have all been underneath that, which makes sense. It's game seven. Not very many people are wanting to sort of make a mistake, so they're very cautious with the puck, and not very many like I don't know, ballsy moves. Or I guess there's probably a better word for that, but that was the first word that came to my mind. Yeah, I think Florida got back to sort of their games 1 through 3 team. They sort of looked a bit outmatched games 4 through 6. I've definitely found that in the first period they were sort of back. They had that jump in their step. They sort of I've heard they sort of like reset, sort of refocused. I think after 3-0 they kind of like maybe didn't really like hit the brakes, but like sort of just thought, okay, we're up 3-0, we got this. And then all of a sudden Edmonton found a second gear and Florida sort of shut that down. So yeah.
No, I totally agree.
One thing that in all obviously we'll get to my next point in a sec, but Connor McDavid named the Conn Smythe first player since 2003 that a losing player or a player on the losing team has been named the MVP of the playoffs. What are your thoughts, opinions on that?
I thought it was well deserved. I don't think anyone from Florida took it, like, had the chance to take it from him. It was kind of Florida's been like this the whole time. It's kind of a group effort from them. Um, Obviously, Barkov had a great start to the playoffs, not just points wise, but defensively as well. But that kind of slowed down as McDavid kind of picked it up in the middle part of the series, which kind of took him out of it. And then obviously Bob didn't have the greatest 4 through 6 stretch either, which kind of killed it for him. So yeah, I feel like with Florida being such a 4 line team, 3 pairing team, it was just kind of McDavid's the whole way around. And I mean, well deserved. It was kind of weird to not see anyone actually take the trophy when it was awarded, but I kind of feel like it would have been a little awkward if he grabbed it. It would have been a very depressing photo, so I'm okay with it
Yeah, I
not
was
being.
I was actually gonna ask you that before I gave sort of my opinion on it, but I've seen a lot of like mixed opinions on whether or not people thought that he should have came out and accepted that trophy. I know my stance on it, but I wanted to hear your stance about that.
I lean either way. I would have been okay if he did, but also I'm very okay with that he didn't because then again, the picture would have been depressing. It would have been kind of a meme. I feel like until he eventually win ones, hopefully, and it doesn't bother me. I'll say that.
Yeah, I have no issues with it. I actually am completely okay with him not coming out. That's not the trophy that he wants. Like, sure, it's nice to be named the playoff MVP, but I think, 10 times out of 10 he would trade a consummate for a Stanley Cup. That's what these players play for. They play for the win it all and not be named just a playoff MVP on a losing team. And yeah, I have no issues with him being named playoff MVP. I'm kind of sort of not like taken back, but I'm kind of disappointed that it was his game 7 and he didn't put up a point, a player that's been so, and even in game 6, I don't believe he had a point, but Edmonton did win that, so that one sort of flew under the radar. But I would have sort of liked, not saying that like he didn't have an amazing playoff, he broke Gretzky's record for most playoff points, but game 7 probably the biggest game of his career up till now. I don't want to say he was invisible, but he sort of wasn't like the McDavid in the earlier games of that series. And I also think Florida did a really good job of shutting him down. The second he got the puck, they didn't let him sort of get his feet moving. They were on him right away, 2 players on him. But I would have liked to seen a bit more from McDavid. I also think coming in the third period, him and Draisaitl, they both looked gassed. Like they looked like they were out of steam. They were going every second shift, so it makes sense whenever you're down 2-1. But yeah, I think that sort of getting up to that sort of empty net, they were sort of out of gas and had nothing left in the tank.
Yeah, they were definitely out of gas, and I mean, you got to kind of expect that being the star players. You're going to get tons of ice time, especially with the series on the line and a close game. You're going to be out there all the time. Yeah, you would have liked to seen him do something there in a game 7. I mean, you're an all-star player. Maybe a lot of people call you the best in the league, so you got to go out and take that moment, and he didn't do that, which is unfortunate. And it kind of sucks because although people expect that he'll be back there, I was listening to not a comparison, but kind of a comparison where it's like you expect to get there, but sometimes you only get one. Like you think of Ovechkin, and the Caps had such a good team for so long, but only got there once. And once he got there, he took it, he won it, and you never know with the salary cap and teams being as even as they are now if he'll get another chance.
Yeah, you look at it as a young player, you could make it there in your first few years and think, I'm young, I got here, but all of a sudden you're year 15, 16 into your career and you're just saying, hey, I want to get back to the cup. I want to get a cup win. So you're sort of just picking a team. But yeah, I think it's honestly, Ovechkin's a great example about how, you got to make your mark. You got to your spot, or else you never know if you're ever going to get back here. And it looks like for Ovechkin that it doesn't look like he's going to make it back to the Stanley Cup final, in his career, unless sort of Washington does something crazy in these next 2 years, I think that he sort of has left. But yeah, you never know if you're ever going to make it back to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, like if you think about how great Ovechkin is, obviously, how even though he's one of the best players of all time, how differently are people looking at him if he doesn't win a Stanley Cup? You know, it's even with the goals he has, if he doesn't win the Stanley Cup, people are looking at him a lot differently, right? So it would have been nice for him to take that moment and make it his, but wasn't able to do it.
Yeah. One thing before we sort of get on to these trades, and we'll sort of put the 2024 season in the rearview mirror. I want to talk to you quickly about the Stanley Cup sort of lifting line, I guess I'll call it. I don't know. There's definitely a better word for that. Did you have any sort of issues with it? It went from Barkov, Brodsky. I think it then went to Okposo, which went to Ekman Larson to Kulikov. Do you have any issues with sort of? I know obviously it's a very minor sort of thing, but I know we always like to talk about the sort of the line that it goes in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, did you have a person you thought it was going to go to first?
I would have liked to see Ekblad. He's the longest tenured Panther. He's
Yeah.
been there through the thick and thin, and not that I really had any like I like Bobrovsky being second. I like Kyle Okposo being up there. I just wish that Ekblad maybe got it before Ekman Larson and Kulikov, considering I know they both played over 1,000 games in the league. But Ekblad's been here for the longest. I thought that he should have got it maybe after Okposo. But other than that, I don't really have any issues with sort of how it went.
Yeah, my only issue was kind of same as you. I made a prediction um, after Florida won, and I gave two people I thought I would go to first, and I said Okposo because obviously he's probably I think he's the oldest player on the team,
I believe
and
so.
then Ekblad was the other. So that's my only issue is that Ekblad it took so long to get to him. I feel like uh, I can see Kulikov because he was drafted there. He left, he came back. He was a big part, but Ekblad is the longest tenured Florida Panther. He's been there since I think 2014. Um, and in some of those years, they were really, really bad, and he stuck around and was kind of the only main piece there until Barkov got there and they started, bolstering this team, but so I thought he should have gotten it sooner than 4th or I mean, 5th or 6th or whatever he got, but, I mean, it is what it is. He probably doesn't care if he was 1st or last, so
Yeah, that's about yeah, like I said, very minor sort of thing that we like to talk about, but it's always sort of interesting to see, who will get it. Um, so yeah. Also one more thing I forgot to mention. I guessed the series right. I said Florida in seven.
so did I. So did I.
Did you say
We
okay?
both did.
I couldn't remember what you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah,
But
we
then I
both
also mentioned that Edmonton would not lose an elimination game at home, and they ended up winning two. So
I do
I should
remember you
have bought a
saying that.
lottery ticket.
Yeah, I do remember you saying that.
Anyways, moving on to sort of putting, as I mentioned, putting the 2024 season in the rearview mirror as, on July 1st, we start a new year. There was a couple trades, a lot of goalie trades going down.
Yeah.
We'll start with the one that happened sort of before the Stanley Cup ended, which was the Markstrom deal. It was Jacob Markstrom to the New Jersey Devils for a 2025, I believe it was unprotected. I could be wrong. It might be like top 10 protected or something. And defenseman Kevin Ball, with Markstrom's, I think about 39% of his salary retained or something along
I
that. He's
think it
got
was 33,
33. He's got
I
two
think.
years left at 6 mil. Your thoughts, opinions, concerns?
I think it's a good trade both ways. I think Markstrom obviously made it known that he wanted to play for a contender, and I think New Jersey's a perfect fit. A very young team, a new coach who has experience coaching a young bright team, and it kind of feels like New Jersey's only problem was their goaltending. You look at this year; they traded both their goalies and brought in two new goalies in at the trade deadline. So obviously they were looking for a fix there to try and make a late push into the playoffs, and ultimately it didn't work. But um, you can tell where their problem is. They got really good defense. They got a really good offensive core. Um, so I think Markstrom and Allen's going to be a great 1-2 punch back there for New Jersey, and I don't see a world where they don't make playoffs next year because of it. And for Calgary, if you're looking to tank or looking to rebuild, I should say, you don't want a older goalie who's gonna steal you some games. Markstrom's still a good goalie in this league, and he's gonna win you some hockey games, and they get a they get a first round pick out of it and a young defenseman, who, from what I've heard and seen, he's not gonna put up a bunch of points, but he's a steady defensive defenseman, which is huge for Calgary as they kinda struggle to keep pucks out of their nets at time, and I think it's just a good move for both teams, and especially for Calgary. Just it's nice to see they're doing right by the player who's done a lot for them in the past couple years.
Yeah, obviously this we thought that he might head there at the trade deadline last year. That deal obviously never went through. They ended up getting Jake Allen just as sort of replacement. But yeah, I got no issues with the deal for both teams. Obviously, New Jersey wanted to get back to playoff contention because they do have a playoff contending team. Just goalie was that one question mark they had. And I like the trade for Calgary because it opens up a spot for Dustin Wolf to finally get that start. He's been a pretty top goal, a pretty coveted goalie prospect in their system for a lot of years now, and he was sort of stuck behind Vladar and Markstrom. So getting now he'll be a full-time NHLer, whether he's a 1B, 1A, sort of to sort of slowly work him into the NHL. We'll see that next year. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Kevin Ball. He's a former Auto 67, so I have watched a lot of him as he came up. Won a gold with Team Canada at the World Juniors, and yeah, he like you said, he doesn't put up many points, but he's just a steady third line, big body defenseman. Before we get to another trade that was on the same day, we have sort of two re-signings. One guy we talked about, Jalen Chatfield, 3-year contract with Carolina, and a big one, Philip Hronek, 8-year deal worth a lot of money. Any of those contracts overpays. I believe the Chatfield one was about like three something.
No, I feel like defensemen they're gonna be looking for a lot more money, even though Chatfield was like a third pairing guy in the playoffs. Um, you still got to pay a lot for players like that, and I mean, you look at Carolina's defensemen; they're losing arguably their top two defensemen this year to free agency. Um, so they need some bodies back there. So I feel like that's a good deal, especially because he looked pretty good in the playoffs for Carolina. And then Hronik, um, at first I thought it was an overpayment, but the way he plays is a perfect complement to Hughes. I feel like Hughes is the point guy where Hronik's more the defensive guy. It's a really good pairing. Now you're going to have your top pairing defenseman for the next however many years, 6, 7 years, locked up for good. So I mean, to have that not have to worry about that, I should say, for the next 6, 7 years is huge for Vancouver, and after some time's gone by, I think it's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, another re-sign, three more re-signs before we get back into trades. My Pittsburgh Penguins re-signed Nedeljkovic to a 2-year, $5 million contract. Dylan DeMello, 4 years, $19.6 million contract with Winnipeg, and Casey Middlestad, who they got in a trade this past deadline, with Colorado, 3 year, $17.25 million extension. Give me your just quick thoughts. I know these are sort of minor re-signings, but give me your quick thoughts on these three deals.
I really like the Middlestat deal. I think Colorado has been searching for a second line center since Kadri left, and I think he can fill that role really well. He looked pretty good for them after he got traded. The Pittsburgh one kind of makes me think that, and I'm sure you've heard rumors that Jari might be on the move. We'll see what happens there, but obviously, Pittsburgh's been wanting him to play games, and Jari has not been able to play games the last couple years, and that's, I mean, it's only 2.5 mil, but 2.5 mil
A
is
lot for a
something you're not
backup.
a lot for a backup, which makes me think he might not be a backup, makes me think he might be a 1B sort of guy.
Mhm.
So we'll see what happens there. And then DeMello he's another steady defenseman. Looked decent for the Jets in the playoffs, so
Yeah,
not
I think DeMello fits really nice beside Josh Morrissey on that first pair,
yeah.
given that Morrissey's sort of an offensive first guy, DeMello's defensive. Yeah, the Pittsburgh one does make me sort of think that Jari they could be shopping him around. We have seen a lot of goaltenders go. We'll talk about two more trades that involve starting goalies, but Pittsburgh has Joe Bloomquist, who looks like he's ready to make the NHL. He's a 22-year-old goalie that he was named, I think, the rookie of the year, rookie goaltender of the year in the AHL this year. Um, and yeah, I've listened to a couple of the 32 Thoughts podcasts, and it seems like the Penguins are shopping Jari around. And based off some of the sort of trades that have came up, based off this Markstrom deal, Jari has better counting numbers over his career than Markstrom, but the one obviously question for Jari is always going to be his health. But yeah, we'll see when the time comes. Could that be sometime before Monday to free up some cap space? I guess we'll find out.
for sure.
Another trade that happened was Darcy Kemper for Pierre-Luc Dubois straight up.
Not gonna lie, when I first heard this trade, I kind of thought the Kings got fleeced a little bit. Um, but after kind of thinking about it, I actually like the trade for both teams. I think it makes sense for both teams. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Cam Talbot's a free agent,
He's a
and
UFA, yes.
he's also just 70 years old. So, moving on to a guy that can still play goal NHL games, I think is huge for a Kings team that's trying to get past the first round. Maybe if they don't see Edmonton, they can accomplish that. But and I think that works well for them. And then if you look at Washington side of things, obviously they they were probably the worst team to make the playoffs in a very long time. They kind of just squeaked their way in there, and to take a chance on a still young, unproven Pierre-Luc Dubois, I feel like the risk is worth the reward. If he doesn't work out, well, your team's probably not gonna be good anyways, and if he does work out and can somehow get back to the early Columbus days, then you have a steal there, so, I think the risk is worth it for Washington, and I think the steady goaltending you can hope to get, is worth it for the Kings as well.
Yeah, I was more of a fan personally for LA just because I don't like the contract of Pierre-Luc Dubois. Not that I think he's a terrible player, but he has had some locker room issues. He hasn't performed to that contract as of yet. And the fact that the Kings got out of it, completely without retaining anything, it makes me sort of think that they are going to try to make a splash on Monday, whether that's a guy like Jake Gensel to replace Dubois. Time will tell. And it gives them sort of, like you said, a steady goaltender. Kemper did get beat out of his starting role this year by Charlie Lindgren, so it looks like that's who the Capitals are going to be rolling with for next season. And like you said, the Washington, if they're bad, they can just eat this contract up and sort of use him as a either whether he's playing first line or second line center. He's not a bad player. Is he worth that contract? No. But is he a bad player? Also, no. Um, what else? Is that it? Is that all
Well,
I?
no, I feel like if you just look at where he was playing with the Kings, he was shuffling between second and third line. Um, you got to assume he's going to be playing first line unless Dylan Strome takes that spot. Um, and if you're playing alongside Alex Ovechkin, your point total will at least your assist number should look pretty good. So I think it'll be an improvement and a spot that he can actually get a lot more play time than he was getting in LA and maybe grow some confidence.
Yeah, for sure. Next trade is probably I would say it's the biggest one for the goaltender trades.
Definitely.
Ottawa traded for Linus Ullmark for the 25th overall pick tomorrow night. Jonas Korpisalo, who they signed last year, 25% retained, and Mark, I'm gonna say his last name wrong, but I think it's like Kastelik.
Is something like that, yeah. Fourth liner.
But yeah, and the one thing that should be noted is this trade is not barring an extension with Ottawa. So Linus Ullmark is going to play out his final, or it seems like what we're hearing so far is that Linus Ullmark is going to play out this final year of his contract before he becomes a UFA at the end of this next year.
Yeah, and again, I feel like I think I just said this with Washington, but I think the risk is worth it if you're Ottawa. Um, again, they're kind of in a situation where every year for the past 2, maybe 3 years, we're like, this roster is really like could surprise a lot of people, and they haven't surprised anybody. They've been disappointing the last couple years, and I think goaltending is a big part of that. Um, Korpisalo wasn't what they expected, and so I feel like that's not bad. And then Allmark, if he's really good, um, that probably means Ottawa is pushing for a playoff spot, um, which means he might resign there if they come close to the playoffs or squeak into a playoff spot. I feel like you could see Allmark resign there. Um, and if they're bad again, well, then the risk just didn't pan out right. But so I think it's worth it for Ottawa. And then for Boston, you weren't gonna resign Allmark,
No.
and you kind of need that cap space if you're Boston, because you got a lot of people to sign this year, and like Jake DeBrusk and Swayman and players like that. So I feel like if you're Boston, you got a decent fourth liner, you got your backup goalie, and you also got a first round pick. So
Yep, for sure. So one more for re-signing before we get to some fun. I just have a couple fun questions to ask you based off free agency that opens this Friday. I figured that it wouldn't be very time worthy to go through like some players because I think it's so hard to pick where a player is going to sign.
it's
Um,
impossible.
but today, or last night, there was a trade that went down that isn't, the most important trade. But it just cleared up some cap space for Vancouver. They traded, I'm not gonna find it now.
Ilya Mikheyev and Sam Lafferty and a
Ilya Mikheyev and the rights to Sam Lafferty for like a fifth round pick, and I think they attached a second to take on Mikheyev's terrible contract. But
I think the
then
full trade was Mikheyev, Lafferty, and a
second
second for a
for like
fourth.
fourth or a fifth. I think it was a fourth.
Yeah,
I think you're right. And
yeah.
then today they re-signed Dakota Joshua, who I actually really like as a player, to a 4-year contract, only at 3.25 mil, which I thought on the open market he could have got a bit more.
He definitely could have got more. That's a great deal for Vancouver. Um, I feel like that trade directly was the reason that trade happened because of the signing. If you're Dakota Joshua, you must really like Vancouver because you probably could have gotten at least an extra mil on in free agency. So he must have liked his role. Obviously, Vancouver liked his role, and there was a mutual uh, likeness there. So it's a great deal both ways, I think.
Yeah, so as mentioned, free agency opens on Monday. You guys will be watching our sort of recap to the first week of free agency next Friday because that'll probably be the most newsworthy stuff to talk about at the point in time. But I want you to give me your boldest prediction for Monday, whether it's a trade, whether it's a signing, whether it's any sort of news. You give me your boldest sort of prediction that we will get or see.
My boldest prediction.
It could not come true. It could be something you want to happen. Just give me your boldest sort of prediction.
Um, I don't know how bold it is. I feel like as soon as July 1st hits, we're gonna see a Mitch Marner trade. I don't know what that's for yet, but I feel like that's coming. Um, who would even be the biggest free agent? Is it Gensel?
Stamkos, Gensel,
Stamkos is
Avo
gonna sign.
Teravainen's in there. Sam
Stamkos is gonna
Reinhart.
sign. Okay, so I think Reinhardt's gonna resign after winning the Stanley Cup. If Reinhardt doesn't resign, him scoring the game-winning goal, he can ask for whatever number he wants, and that's gonna happen. Here's gonna be kind of a bold prediction. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I could see it. I'm gonna say Leon Draisaitl does not sign an extension come
I could
July
see
1st,
that.
which would
But
be bold. Another thing, which I don't know if it's that bold, but I don't not many big free agents go to Canadian markets, especially if their name's not Montreal or Toronto. So I'm gonna say Jake Gensel finds a home in Vancouver.
yes, I was that wasn't mine. I'm gonna give mine in a second, and it does revolve around Jake Gensel. But if he's gonna come to a come to a Pittsburgh, please come
Back
home.
to
Please
Pittsburgh.
come home, Jake. Please come home. If he's gonna go to a Canadian market, I do believe it will be Vancouver.
Mhm.
Um, but my sort of bold move is one, I think Steven Stamkos does not re-sign with the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Okay.
And
Okay.
two, I
That's
think
bold.
Jake Gensel goes to a team that nobody's talked about, whether that's like Utah, whether he goes to Minnesota, a team that has not been sort of talked about. We've heard Carolina, we've heard Vancouver, we've heard Pittsburgh, we've heard the Rangers in talks, we've heard the Kings, we've heard all these sort of bigger market teams that can afford Gensel, but I think he's going to go to a team that's going to come out of nowhere and just sign him because I think they'll
He's
get
going
him
to
the
the
most
Leafs.
money.
He's going to the Leafs once they trade Marner.
Oh, you can have him.
Here's one thing I want to bring up to you. I don't know if you've heard this. The Jets are kind of dealing with a prospect problem right
Oh
now.
yeah, Rutger McGroarty.
Rucker McGorty is going to get traded.
100%.
When do you think it happens? I think it happens draft night, personally.
Tomorrow night. I wouldn't be surprised if
I
I
think it
have
happens
heard.
tomorrow night.
I don't know. You listen to 32 Thoughts, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I heard Friedman say that they are trying to get into the first round with this pick. Where with him, they're trying to get
Well,
into the.
you
They don't
you're
have a first
definitely
round
getting
pick.
into the
They
you're
don't have a
definitely
first
getting
round
in
pick.
the first round. If you trade
Um,
draft night, you're getting in the first round with Rutger McGorty.
for sure. But one thing that actually this reminded me of it. We've started to see this where teams are like refusing to play for who they get drafted by, and I am not a fan, to be honest.
Yeah, and it seems to be US college players.
Yes, it is only U.S. college players. We are seeing like Matvey Michkov, who, oh, I guess we didn't talk about that. He's going to come over next year,
He's
which is
coming.
great,
That's huge
which
for
is great as a
for
Pittsburgh fan. I love hearing that.
him.
Um, but it seems like you got Cutter Goche, you got McGordy. I'm gonna probably miss a couple, but there's been a few more players where they are just saying, no, I will not be playing for you. And I personally don't agree with that take or that stance at all. I think that you're lucky that you got drafted by this team. You know, play this, play out your entry level deal. If you don't like the team, you don't like what you're getting, go somewhere else.
I think you're seeing this in college players because they get paid quite a bit to play college hockey. Um, Whereas players like in the OHL, you're not making a whole lot of money and stuff like that. Um, I know I was like you said we were talking listening to 32 Thoughts. Rucker McGorty would they're saying he would probably make more money in college next year than if he played in the AHL,
Hmm.
um, which probably adds a lot to that. So I think that's why you're seeing it in college players, so they have a lot more say in kind of what happens. But I don't really like it either. It's like if you don't like the team you're drafted by, play your 3 years and then go where you want. That's kind of how it works. Um, if you're a good player, you're not gonna get like, normally, if you're a good player, you're not gonna get drafted to a place you wanna go to because either teams are rebuilding or you slide a little bit like Rutger and go to a good team that's in the playoffs and you there's not a whole lot of opportunity there, but make your opportunity. Go show them that you're worth a roster spot and make it happen, but, I mean, he's gonna get traded. I think it's draft night. I don't know for what, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I got nothing left, unless you got some.
No?
So yeah, I think we'll end it there. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Once again, thank you for the support on episode 100. Based off that support, we'll definitely try to get more interviews more often because we enjoy doing them, and two, it seems like you guys want to watch that more than us talking. But
Don't
yeah,
blame
we will be back next week to tell you that Steven Stamkos and Jake Gensel both signed with the Pittsburgh Penguins.
That would be crazy.